Have you ever trusted your own daughter, only to feel her fist strike your face after her husband whispered poison into her ear? That's what happened to me. At 76 years old, after a lifetime of discipline and sacrifice, I thought the worst betrayal I'd ever witness was inside a courtroom. I was wrong. The deepest wound came not from strangers, but from my own blood. But what my daughter and son-in-law didn't know was that I had spent decades watching liars unravel, and I was ready. What followed wasn't just a family dispute. It was a battle for my dignity, my faith, and the right to decide my own future. Stay with me, because what happened next turned their plan upside down and changed everything. My name is Walter Hensley. I'm 77 years old, and I've been living alone in a quiet corner of Asheville, North Carolina for nearly a decade now. 10 years ago, I buried my wife, Ruth. Since then, the only thing keeping me steady has been order in the way I wake, eat, pray, and breathe. Every morning, I rise at exactly 6:30 a.m., not 6:29, not 6:31. I keep the alarm clock by my bedside, and though it rarely gets the chance to ring more than once, it has never failed me. My late wife used to tease me about it. "Walter," she'd say, "you wake up before the Lord's rooster even crows." She was right. Discipline is second nature to me. First thing I do, even before sliding into my slippers, is bow my head and whisper a prayer. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Psalm 118:24. Some mornings that prayer feels heavy in my mouth, as if my heart hasn't quite caught up. But I say it anyway. Because faith isn't about how you feel, it's about what you choose to stand on. I make my bed with sharp corners, smoothing the blanket exactly 3 times with the flat of my palm. Then comes my bathroom ritual, 19 steps, always in the same order. Brush my teeth for precisely 3 minutes, shave with a straight razor. Yes, the old kind, the kind that can cut your throat if your hand slips. I know young men today prefer electric gadgets, but I've always said there's a certain reverence in holding steel to your skin. A man should feel the weight of the blade that keeps him sharp. By 7:30, I'm fully dressed. Always the same white starched shirt, pressed gray slacks, and a cardigan. Even in July heat. People chuckle, call me old-fashioned. A young woman at the post office once laughed and said, "Mr. Hensley, you look like you stepped out of a black and white movie." She didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as one. Men used to look like men, not like they'd rolled out of bed in sweatpants. Breakfast never changes, either oatmeal cooked in water, 1 slice of toast with butter, a glass of orange juice, and strong black coffee. As I eat, I read the paper newspaper, not a glowing phone screen, not some endless online scroll. The smell of fresh ink, the rustle of the pages. Those are things the digital age can't replicate. I've always been meticulous. Some would say obsessive. But after 40 years working as a court clerk, writing down every word spoken in a courtroom, you learn that details matter. You miss one word, you might miss the truth. After breakfast, I pull out my little leather-bound notebook. I've kept daily financial records since 1969, every cent in, every cent out. Not because I'm poor, thank the Lord, Ruth, and I always had enough, but because to me, money is stewardship. It's not about hoarding, it's about accountability. Luke 16:10 says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." That's what I live by. Ruth never quite understood. She'd laugh and say, "Walter, you're tallying every penny as if the angels are auditing you." I suppose she was right. Now that she's gone, the house is quiet. Too quiet. Sometimes I leave the TV on just to drown out the silence, but most days I lean into the quiet. I've gotten used to hearing my own footsteps echo across polished wood floors. My neighbors come and go, kids ride bicycles past my porch. But in here in my little sanctuary, time moves slow. My health is decent for a man my age. A handful of pills each morning, blood pressure, cholesterol, vitamins, and a daily 2-mile walk around the neighborhood keep me on my feet. I thank God I can still bend down to tie my shoes, still smell Ruth's roses blooming in the garden. Many men my age aren't so fortunate. Some are confined to nursing homes left to strangers. That won't be me. Not if I can help it. I'd rather breathe my last in my own bed with my Bible on the nightstand. But here's the truth for all the order, all the faith, all the routines. There's a storm that routine can't protect you from. Family. Specifically my daughter Marion and her husband Travis. They live in Charlotte about 2 hours east. Big house, big car, big ambitions. Too big for their own income if you ask me. They call every few weeks, visit every couple of months. And I know because 40 years in court taught me how to hear the real words behind polite voices, that they rarely come for me. They come for something else. Money. It always starts sweet. Daddy, we've missed you. Walter, you should see our new garden project. But it always ends with, we were wondering if you could help us out. Last year it was a trip to Italy. Before that, a kitchen remodel. Every time they call it a loan. Every time I know it won't come back. And now Marion has called again. This Friday evening she and Travis are coming over with dinner. My heart tells me it isn't just dinner. It never is. Before I take you deeper into my story, I'd love to know where are you listening from tonight. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if these family stories speak to your heart, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. It was Wednesday evening when the phone rang at precisely 5:30. I didn't need to check the caller ID. At that hour, it's always my daughter Marion. "Hello, Daddy," she chirped, her voice coated with that cheerful tone people use when they're talking to toddlers or old folks. "How are you today? Did you take your medication?" "Yes, Marion, I don't forget," I replied, steady as always. She went through her usual checklist, what I had for lunch, if I'd seen the doctor, whether I was getting enough vegetables. I answered each question politely, though inside I wondered if she's so worried. Why does she only visit once every couple of months? Finally, after 4 minutes of pleasantries, her voice shifted a notch higher. That was my cue. She was about to say something I wouldn't like. "Daddy, Travis and I were thinking of coming over Friday night. We'll bring dinner so you don't have to worry about cooking." How does that sound? My grip on the phone tightened. A Friday night visit. They never come without a reason. Last time it was help for a trip to Italy. Before that, money for a bathroom remodel. I had a hunch this time would be no different, but I didn't show my suspicion. "Friday will be fine," I said evenly. She sounded pleased, too pleased. "Great. We'll be there around 6:30. And Daddy, don't clean on purpose, okay? We're not coming to inspect." That was almost funny. Because of course I would clean. I always clean before they visit, as if preparing for an inspection. The polished floors, the dusted shelves, the curtains washed. Those things give me peace. When you've spent 40 years recording chaos in courtrooms, you cling to order in your own house. After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the clock. The house was quiet as always, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My heart, though, was restless. I tried to read scripture for comfort. I opened to Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. The verse hit me differently that evening. My own daughter and her husband, always borrowing, never repaying, had slowly turned me into their safety net. Was I enabling them, or was I just too afraid of losing the last strand of family I had? I folded my Bible shut and whispered, "Lord, give me wisdom. Let me see through the sweet words and give me courage to stand firm if I must." The next day I began preparing. Not just the house, but myself. I ironed fresh shirts, shined my shoes, even trimmed the edges of Ruth's rose bushes out front. It wasn't vanity, it was ritual. A way of telling myself that I still had control, that I was still the head of this home. And yet deep down, I knew Friday night would bring more than dinner. It would bring demands dressed in fine words, and I would have to decide whether to keep yielding or finally draw a line. By Friday afternoon, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and soap. I had spent 2 days scrubbing every corner, washing the curtains, even shining the silver tea set Ruth and I received on our wedding day. My back ached, but I ignored it. A clean house wasn't just for them, it was for me. Order was my shield. At 6:20 sharp, I heard the familiar sound of tires on the gravel. I peeked through the front window. Their black Lexus SUV pulled into my driveway. Too new, too polished for people who always claimed to be struggling. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. Marion stepped out first, carrying a paper bag of groceries. She wore an elegant coat, her hair perfectly styled perfume too strong for my taste. Behind her, Travis appeared with a bottle of wine French I could see from the label, and a smirk that never sat right with me. Daddy Marion leaned in and kissed my cheek. "It's so good to see you." "Hello, Marion," I answered. "Good evening, Travis." Travis's handshake was firm, deliberate. "Walter," he nodded. "We brought a good Bordeaux tonight." He said it the way a man drops a brand name just to see if you'll be impressed. They stepped inside, and as always, Marion's eyes immediately scanned the room like a detective looking for clues. Her gaze darted to the mantel, the bookshelves, the rug. "Oh, Daddy," she said finally, "the house is spotless." "Did you hire someone to help?" "No," I replied evenly. "I'm still capable of pushing a mop myself." Travis chuckled under his breath. "For a man your age, you're holding up well. A man your age." As if 77 were already a foot in the grave. I wanted to tell him that I still walked 2 miles every morning, still cooked my own meals, still kept my finances in order better than most men half his age. But I bit my tongue. Arguing with Travis was like casting pearls before swine. Marion carried the groceries into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the polished floorboards. Within seconds, she was pulling open my refrigerator. "Daddy, you have almost nothing in here. Canned soup, frozen dinners, hardly any produce." "You can't live like this," I sighed. "I buy what I can finish before it spoils. I was planning to shop tomorrow." She shook her head, clearly unconvinced. "You should hire someone to do groceries for you. Or better yet, consider moving to a place where people can keep an eye on you." I let her words hang in the air. She meant a nursing home, though she'd never say it outright. From the dining room, Travis poured wine into 3 glasses. He handed me one, but filled it only halfway. "With your medication, best not to overdo it," he said with that condescending grin. "1 glass is enough," I replied. Though truth be told, I could have used a second just to steady myself. We sat down at the table. Marian moved quickly, seasoning the steaks, preparing potatoes for the oven, tossing a salad. Cooking had always been her talent, one of the few things she inherited from her mother. Watching her for just a moment, I remembered the little girl who used to beg me to taste her first attempts at cookies, waiting for my approval with wide eyes. For a fleeting second, my heart softened, but then Travis's voice cut through. "So, Walter." He began swirling the wine in his glass like some kind of connoisseur. "How's retirement treating you? Must be quiet." "Yes," I said simply. "Quiet is a blessing." He laughed. "Not everyone would agree. Some might say too much. Quiet makes a man forgetful." I looked at him over the rim of my glass. His words lingered sharper than they appeared. Forgetful. It wasn't casual small talk. It was the first stone carefully thrown. And I knew then this dinner wasn't about family. It was about something else. Something bigger and far less innocent. If you're still following along with me up to this point, type a number 1 in the comments. It lets me know you're here listening, and it keeps these stories alive. The steaks sizzled in the pan, the smell filling the house with a richness that almost disguised the tension hanging in the air. We sat down, plates neatly arranged, Travis pouring just enough wine to wet the rim of my glass. Marian smiled too brightly, her fork tapping against the plate like a nervous metronome. "Daddy," she began between bites. "Have you heard about the new program for retirees? Extra benefits, a little financial cushion." "Yes," I answered calmly. "I read about it in the paper." She smiled, but her eyes flicked quickly to Travis before she continued. "Well, every little bit helps, right? Especially when things come up." Here it comes, I thought. Travis leaned forward, placing his glass down with exaggerated care. "Walter, we wouldn't bring this up if it weren't serious. The roof at our place, it's giving us real trouble. After those last rains, we've got leaks in 3 different rooms." I cut into my steak slowly, deliberately. "That's unfortunate." "We had contractors look at it," Marian added quickly. "The lowest estimate we got was $20,000. That's just to get it safe. If they find hidden problems, it could be more." "20,000, I repeated softly, as though testing the words. It was a staggering sum, even for me. Travis sighed, shaking his head. "Insurance won't cover it. Says it's natural wear and tear. You can imagine the stress we're under." My eyes drifted toward his wrist. A brand new Rolex gleamed under the dining room lights. Marian's handbag, tossed casually on the sofa, was leather and designer. And just last month, I'd received a postcard from them in Italy. Struggling hardly. Marian reached across the table, her tone sweetened like syrup. "Daddy, we thought maybe you could help us. Just a loan, of course. We'll pay it back when things get better." The word loan stung me like a wasp. I had heard it too many times. Loan for their European trip. Loan for their kitchen remodel. Loan for their new car. Not 1 cent ever came back. I put my fork down and folded my hands. "That is a very serious amount of money," I said quietly. Marian's smile faltered. She was expecting a quick yes. Travis cleared his throat. "We wouldn't ask if it weren't absolutely necessary, Walter. But a roof? Well, you can't put that off." For a moment, I didn't answer. I bowed my head slightly and prayed inside, "Lord, grant me wisdom. Let me see through what is truth and what is manipulation." When I lifted my gaze again, I saw their faces, hopeful, tense, calculating. And I knew deep down this wasn't about a roof. This was about testing how far they could push me. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip of wine, and simply said, "I'll think about it." Their relief was visible, but not complete. They had expected me to yield immediately. Instead, I gave them uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, I felt the faint stirrings of strength. Because deep in my heart, I knew this was not the end of the conversation. This was only the beginning. Sunday noon, I drove the 2 hours east to Charlotte, my old Buick humming steadily down the highway. The city was busier, flashier than I liked, but Marion had insisted I come for lunch. As I pulled into their neighborhood, I noticed the manicured lawns, the stone facades, the gleaming cars parked in driveways. Struggling, they had said. But everything around me whispered otherwise. Their house looked the same as always from the outside, but the moment Marion opened the door, I saw it. A brand new leather sectional sofa stretched across the living room, a thick Persian rug beneath it, and a massive flat-screen television mounted on the wall. The kind of television that could pay for half a roof. My eyes rose instinctively toward the ceiling. The roof above me looked perfectly intact. No stains, no leaks, no buckets set out to catch dripping water. Marion noticed my gaze and hurried me past. "Daddy, don't just stand there, come in. Travis is pouring wine." In the dining room, the table was set for 3 with porcelain plates I had never seen before. Gold trim, polished silverware. A small fortune just for eating off china. Travis greeted me with a wide grin, shaking my hand like a politician. "Walter, so glad you came. Try the Merlot, it's imported. Goes beautifully with the roast." I sat down slowly, watching them bustle. Marion in a silk blouse, Travis in a tailored jacket. If this was the look of hardship, then I'd been blind all my life. We began to eat, but my mind wasn't on the food. It was on the rug, the sofa, the television. The pieces didn't add up. Marion filled my plate, then looked at me earnestly. "Daddy, you know we only want the best for you. Have you thought more about the roof situation?" I dabbed my lips with a napkin and answered carefully, "Yes, I've thought about it." Her eyes brightened with hope. Travis leaned forward, eager, and I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "Before I make any decision, I need to know the truth. Is the roof truly broken, or is it just another story?" The air went still. For a moment, even the ticking clock seemed louder. Marion forced a laugh, waving her hand. "Daddy, of course it's true. Why would we lie about something like that?" "Why indeed?" I pushed my chair back slightly, breathing deep. In that quiet, I found myself remembering the verse from church last week. "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy." Looking at my daughter across the table, I wasn't sure which side of that verse she belonged to anymore. The roast sat heavy in my stomach, but it wasn't the food that made me uneasy. It was the way Marion and Travis exchanged glances, quick, sharp, filled with unspoken words. After lunch, Travis leaned toward Marion, his voice dropping low. He must have thought I was too old to notice or too deaf to care. But 40 years in a courtroom taught me how to see what others tried to hide. His lips moved clearly enough. "If he doesn't give us the money, we'll push for guardianship. Doctor will back us up. We'll control everything. Guardianship." The word hit me like a gavel. They weren't just after a loan anymore. They wanted my whole life signed over my house, my accounts, my freedom. I sat very still, my fork resting on the plate. I didn't react. Outwardly, I might have looked like a tired old man lost in thought. Inside, the fire surged through me. Marian reached across the table and touched my hand. "Daddy, you forget things sometimes, don't you? Wouldn't it be easier if someone helped with the bills, the paperwork, all those burdens?" I pulled my hand back gently. "I've been balancing accounts since before either of you were born," I said evenly. Her smile cracked. The mask slipped. "Why do you always resist us?" "We're only trying to help." Travis's jaw tightened. He muttered under his breath, too low for most, but clear to me. "He's in the way. Once the papers are signed, he won't matter." That was when Marian snapped. Her face flushed, her voice trembling. "You don't trust us, do you, after everything we've done for you?" Before I could answer, her hand shot across the table, striking my cheek with a sharp crack. The sting lit my skin, but the deeper wound cut straight into my chest. Travis stood up, muttering, "Calm down," but Marian was shaking, her fists clenched. She struck again, this time with her knuckles. Pain blossomed under my eye. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. The room was silent except for my ragged breathing. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, saw a smear of blood from where her ring had cut my skin. I straightened, slowly meeting her gaze. "So this," I whispered, "is your idea of help?" For a heartbeat, the three of us stood frozen. Marian's chest rose and fell with anger. Travis looked away, ashamed, but not enough to stop her. I steadied myself, and in that moment I remembered the words from Isaiah my pastor once spoke, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." It gave me strength to stand tall, even with blood on my face. They thought I was broken. They thought I was powerless. But they had forgotten I had been preparing for this moment all along. I pressed a handkerchief against my cheek, feeling the warm sting of the cut where Marian's ring had opened my skin. She stood trembling, her face pale now that her fury had burned itself out. Travis hovered behind her, caught between shame and stubborn pride. I straightened, slowly pushed back my chair, and walked to the sideboard where my old leather briefcase rested. Neither of them spoke. Maybe they thought I was going to the bathroom, or perhaps to fetch ice for my cheek. But when I turned back, briefcase in hand, their eyes narrowed. I set it on the table and clicked the brass latches open. Inside lay the weight of 3 long years of suspicion, preparation, and discipline. First, I pulled out a small digital recorder. I pressed play, and their own voices filled the room word for word, every request for loans, every promise to repay that never came, every sly remark about what I wouldn't need much longer. Marian gasped. Travis's jaw tightened. Next, I laid down a stack of signed IOUs, neatly dated each with their signatures. They had thought I was an old fool scribbling notes. In truth, I was building a ledger the way I had done in the courtroom for decades. The total balance was clear, $32,000 owed. Finally, I reached into the briefcase and set a tiny black camera on the table. "This," I said, "has been recording every visit you've made for the last year, including today. Including when you struck me." The color drained from Marian's face. Travis swore under his breath. I folded my hands, meeting both of their eyes. "You thought I was helpless. You thought you could strip me of my dignity, my freedom, and my home. But you forgot one thing: the truth always leaves a trail. And I've been following it." They tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You have 30 days to repay every cent. If you don't, my attorney will file suit. The documents are already prepared." The room was suffocatingly silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause between ticks. For a moment I felt my knees tremble beneath me. The old body weakens, yes, but faith steadies what flesh cannot. I breathed deep and whispered inside, Lord, you are my defender. Let justice be done and let me stand unshaken. When I looked up again, it wasn't fear they saw in my eyes. It was resolve. The silence in the dining room was unbearable, thick as the dust motes in a long, abandoned courthouse. Marian still stood near the table, her fists trembling at her sides. Travis leaned back against the wall, pale as though the air had been stolen from his lungs. I gathered the papers, the recorder, and the small tie-pin camera back into my worn leather briefcase. Every click of the brass latches echoed like a gavel striking wood. I'd spent decades recording the finality of verdicts, but never imagined I would hear one in my own daughter's home. You see, I said my voice low, but unshakable blood may tie us together, but respect, that's what makes us family. And you forfeited that the moment you raised your hand against me, Marian. The moment you whispered of guardianship, Travis. I heard every word. I've recorded every visit. And now the truth is laid bare. Marian's eyes glistened, but there was no repentance there, only fear and desperation. Daddy, please, we didn't mean. I raised a hand the same way a judge halts a babbling lawyer. Don't. Words cannot patch a wound cut this deep. You have 30 days. Every cent you owe will be repaid or we'll settle it in court. The law is not just for strangers, it's for family too, when family forgets what decency means. Travis bristled as though he might lunge forward, but thought better of it. He had underestimated me once tonight. He wouldn't risk it again. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. I turned from them and walked toward the front door. My legs were stiff from the fall, but steady enough. Every step carried the weight of years of silence, suspicion, and the quiet ache of a father's disappointment. At the threshold, I paused, one hand on the doorknob. I always prayed you'd inherit your mother's honesty, I said without looking back. But somewhere along the way, you chose shadows instead of light. That choice is yours to live with now. The only reply was Marian's broken sob. I stepped out into the cool evening. The porch boards creaked beneath my shoes. Behind me, through the window, their silhouettes stood rigid, watching me leave. But I didn't turn. Some doors once closed should remain closed. The garden smelled of damp earth and roses. It was Marian's house, but even here in the manicured shrubs and costly ornaments, I saw no beauty. Only the trappings of money spent to impress, not to nurture. The cab I had called earlier idled at the curb. The driver leaned against the hood, arms crossed. Mr. Nye, he asked. Yes. My voice was hoarse but firm. He hurried to open the door. Before I slid into the back seat, I lifted my eyes to the night sky. The stars, faint against the glow of the city, reminded me of the countless evenings Agnes and I used to sit on our porch, whispering dreams while Cordelia played at our feet. My cheek still burned from Marian's strike, but my spirit felt oddly clear, like a bell rung after years of silence. I whispered the only prayer my heart could form, Lord, guide me forward. Let me not mistake silence for surrender, nor mercy for weakness. The words steadied me more than any cane or pill. As the cab pulled away, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it vanished behind the hedges. I did not look back again. That chapter was finished. My hands rested on the briefcase in my lap, heavy with evidence, yes, but heavier still with the truth of what had been lost. I realized then that tonight wasn't just about debt or property. It was about reclaiming something greater, my dignity, my right to live these final years without fear of manipulation and the certainty that God still had work left for me to do. The city lights blurred as the cab turned onto the main road. My chest rose with a long breath, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not because I had won, but because I had finally let go. It has been 3 months since that night in Marion's dining room, 3 months since the punch, the lies, and the silence that followed. Not once has my phone rung with her name on the screen. No Friday calls. No carefully measured check-ins. The silence at first was deafening, like stepping into a church long abandoned. But gradually, it became something else. An echo that no longer hurt, only reminded me of what had already been lost. Life strangely settled back into its rhythm. I still wake at 7, turning off the alarm within 5 seconds. I still shave, carefully press my shirts, and eat oatmeal for breakfast. But into that old framework, I began weaving new threads, small changes that made each day less about enduring and more about living. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I now walk not toward the park or the grocery store, but to the community center down on Maple Avenue. It's nothing fancy, a low brick building with scuffed floors and fluorescent lights, but inside that modest space, something unexpected took root. It started when I overheard 2 women at the library talking about a seniors' writing group. They just scribble their memories and share them, one of them said with a laugh. Scribble. That word stuck to me. After nearly 40 years of stenography scribbling the darkest and brightest corners of human life, it felt like a challenge. The first day I showed up, the group was already seated around a battered oak table. 8 of them in all. Eleanor, 82, with a sharp wit and a fondness for Civil War history. Harold, a retired sailor who could spin a tale so vivid you could smell the salt air. Mabel, soft-spoken, who had lost her husband and poured her grief onto the page. They greeted me warmly, though, with a hint of curiosity, the newcomer in a starched shirt and cardigan. When it was my turn to read, my hands trembled. I had brought nothing prepared, so I spoke instead. I told them about the courtroom, about the way words filled the air like a storm, then fell silent as my fingers carved them into permanence on the stenograph. About the stories I'd heard, but never told, the lives I'd recorded, but never lived. The room went still. Harold leaned forward. "You've seen people at their lowest ebb, haven't you?" "Yes," I admitted. "And it changed you," Mabel whispered. Not as a question, but as a recognition. Something in my chest broke open that afternoon. For decades I had carried those stories like stones in my pockets, silent weights no one could see. That day I set one down, and in the weeks that followed, I set down more. We began writing assignments together. First memory. A life-changing moment. Someone who taught me something important. For the first time in years, I found myself not just transcribing, but creating. My pen, once an instrument of record, became a tool of release. Each session ends the same way. We pour tea pass around cookies and read aloud. No criticism, just nods, questions, and quiet acknowledgement. In those moments, I feel something I hadn't felt in years, community fellowship, the kind that doesn't ask for money or pretend at concern. Sometimes when I walk home in the fading light, I find myself looking up at the church steeple on the corner, The bell rings 6 times, and the sound carries across the rooftops. I pause listening and whisper the same words each time. Thank you, Lord, for reminding me I'm not alone. It isn't grand or dramatic. It's simple, steady. But faith often is. At home, the roses in my yard still bloom. Agnes's roses. I trim them carefully, whispering to her memory as I work. I tell her about the writing group, about Eleanor's sharp tongue, and Harold's sailor yarns about how Mabel is finally smiling again. I like to think Agnes would be proud. She always believed that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself when the world tried to strip it away. And perhaps in a way I'm learning that lesson all over again. It was late May when the letter arrived. A plain white envelope, my name written in Marian's careful handwriting. For a long time I couldn't bring myself to open it. I placed it on the table beside the roses from my garden and let it sit there for 2 days, silent and accusing, like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. When I finally slid it open, the words spilled out like a wound reopening. She admitted her wrongs, how she and Travis had twisted my trust, how the slap that night was the breaking point. She spoke of regret, not only for what she did, but for the years we lost, years of silence, years of walls built between us, brick by brick, word by word, unspoken. I read every line twice, then folded the letter neatly and returned it to its envelope. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the clock. I thought of Agnes, how she would have read the letter aloud, paused, then told me gently, "She's reaching Julian. Even broken branches still reach for the sun." But forgiveness isn't as simple as unfolding paper. It's not a signature at the bottom of a page. It's a choice. And that night, I wasn't ready to choose. The next morning, I followed my usual routine alarm at 7, breakfast at 8, a slow walk by 9, but something felt different. Each step seemed heavier, as though I carried not just my cane, but the weight of Marian's words. At the community center, when it came time to read aloud, I surprised myself. Instead of sharing a memory, I read from her letter. The room was silent when I finished. Then Eleanor spoke first. "You don't owe her forgiveness, but you might owe yourself peace." Mabel nodded, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes forgiveness is less about them, more about freeing the chains around your own heart." Harold leaned back, crossing his arms. "You've seen storms, Walter. You know not every ship comes back to harbor. But sometimes the storm isn't meant to sink us. It's meant to change our course." I went home thoughtful. Their words stayed with me like the echo of a hymn. That night, instead of reading, I sat in the backyard beneath the roses. The evening sky was streaked with purple, the kind Agnes loved. I closed my eyes and prayed, "Lord, if forgiveness is your will for me, then show me how to carry it without losing the dignity you've restored in me." The answer didn't come as a voice from the clouds, nor in sudden certainty. It came slowly in the quiet recognition that I didn't need to respond right away. Forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a journey, one that could take months, maybe years. And perhaps that was enough for now. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called. Marian and Travis had sold their house. The debt was repaid in full, every dollar plus interest. It was more than I expected, more than I had dared hope. But when the check was placed in my hands, I felt no triumph. Only a solemn closing, like the sound of a heavy book being shut after a long, bitter chapter. That evening, I walked past the church on the corner. Its doors were open for evening service. I didn't go in, but I lingered outside, listening to the faint sound of hymns drifting into the street. For the first time in many years, I felt the faint stirrings of something I thought I had lost hope. I realized then that life had given me a strange gift. By losing the illusion of family, I had found something sturdier: truth, community, faith. And maybe, just maybe, one day, Marion and I could meet again, not as beggar and benefactor, not as accuser and accused, but as two souls scarred by time, still searching for grace. I don't know when that day will come. But as I turned toward home, the night breeze brushing my cheek, I knew this much: I had not been abandoned. My dignity was intact, my faith unbroken. My story, like the roses Agnes planted, was still blooming even in late season. In the end, my journey was not only about betrayal. It was about reclaiming my dignity and holding on to faith when family ties broke apart. Here on Brian's Story, we share real family drama stories that show both the pain of being cast aside and the strength of starting over. If you've ever faced betrayal from those closest to you, remember your dignity is yours to guard. Your faith can guide you forward, and your story isn't finished yet. Stay with us on Brian's Story for more powerful family drama stories that prove it's never too late to rise again.